loud.
Hi, Mandy. How are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, very good, thank you. Yes.
So we're continuing our discussion, right?
Yes.
We started with the sun and the earth signs,
Yes.
and now we're continuing with the sun and the water signs.
Yes.
What the water and the earth signs have in common is that from the perspective of classical astrology, they're both feminine, right? Because the elements water and earth are feminine.
Yes.
And I think when we're talking about the sun and the water sign, we get an interesting polarity because the sun is supposed to be, as a planet, it's supposed to be hot and dry.
Yes.
Right? Whereas the water, all the water signs, because they water,
Yes.
they are cold and moist.
Yes.
So in terms of, elemental kind of, the elemental characters, it would seem that the sun is really contrary to the characters of the water signs, right? So that's something I think it's useful to keep in mind, right?
Definitely.
Not saying that it's very bad for the sun to be in a water sign. Not at all. That wouldn't make sense. But I think it makes for it's a very dynamic kind of placement, and complex, very complex. Yeah.
Based on that,
Mm.
if there was no sun coming through, the water would be ice.
Right. Right. Yes, it would be.
So I'm not quite sure where I'm going with that, but it does sort of change the structure of the water.
Yes.
The kind of, if the sun is not sort of like getting through to it. I know we've got global warming and all that, and we need ice in certain sort of places. But yeah, if the sun was just completely blocked, it would be, well, we wouldn't be here, would we?
No. We need water. Water is the basis of life.
Yes.
On the planet, as is the sun, and they just work together. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So starting with Cancer, which I would say is my moon sign. So I feel like I'm personally invested when I'm discussing.
Yes, but we'll be discussing the moon in another video that
Yes,
we're recording
later today. Yeah.
Save the moon for the moon.
Yeah. No, I understand.
This is going to be a challenge for you to separate the moon from the sun here, as you do have a Cancer moon. Yeah.
Yeah. So
go on, though.
So, and I think the sun expresses itself at a more conscious level in the signs, right?
Okay.
And when we're talking about a sun sign, we're really talking about a kind of a journey that unfolds on an archetypal level. And I think many astrologers today, they consider that the sun sign rarely if ever gets the theme rarely if ever gets fulfilled in a complete way in a person's life, right? It remains a kind of a pattern that impresses itself on a person's awareness, right? And kind of influences the way they interact with other people and where they choose to invest their energy and time. But the theme is, it never gets completely fulfilled, right? And so where I'm going with this is that Cancer, because of its association with the moon, right? Because the moon rules it, it works more comfortably, more naturally as a moon sign when the moon is in Cancer. Okay, but I'll explain that in more detail in the moon video. When the sun is in Cancer, it's kind of placed in it's in a challenging place because Cancer's energy is all about organizing, right? Through an emotional kind of language, let's say, through an emotional type of connection, organizing one's environment in a way that maximizes security.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, right? In a way that makes the Cancer person feel comfortable and at home, right, wherever they go. And this ties, this kind of profile, this psychological profile, it ties in with the traditional symbol for the sign of Cancer, which is the crab, right? So
Right.
when astrologers kind of explain that connection between the crab and the Cancer psychological profile, they say that the Cancer native prefers to avoid direct confrontations, because a direct confrontation has the potential of threatening their security, right, and pushing them outside of their comfort zone. So they will use their emotional intuition and their ability to read other people, both of which are very substantial in the sign of Cancer. They will use these talents to navigate their way around difficult situations, so that in the end they preserve their security and comfort, you know. Um, and when the sun is in Cancer, I think you have this pull between being extroverted and being introverted, right? Because the Cancerian energy is about protecting your comfort, protecting your security, and also the people that you identify as being within your family or tribe, right? But all of this has to be done in the world, and the world is not about you. It's never about you, right? It just involves so many other contending, energies and structures, So the sun in Cancer is like, it's driven to express the will of the sun, but in an indirect, non-confrontational way, right? And sun and Cancer people, like moon and Cancer people, like they have to learn how to manage their moods. Like Cancerians are famous for being very moody.
Yes.
That applies, I think, both in the case of sun in Cancer and moon in Cancer in different ways. And that is really, to understand that, we need to also understand the symbolic, the rulership, like the classical rulership of the moon over Cancer, because the moon is always changing, it just
Yes.
it
Yes.
waxes and wanes and waxes and wanes, and it passes through an entire zodiac sign every 2.5 days, right? So it's like the fastest moving planet, right? Among all the planets,
But yes, I suppose you're right in that even though the sun is in Cancer, Cancer is ruled by the moon, so that you can't totally talk about it and separate the two. My daughter is a Cancer.
Yeah.
And she absolutely kind of lives up to everything that you've just said. I mean, she's extremely moody. I mean, the only person that I can really compare her to is her brother, who I talked about in the sun video, who is a Capricorn, which is the complete opposite sign of the zodiac. It's 180 degrees from Cancer. And he is very outgoing. And she is absolutely kind of, not being funny, we're in the middle of the lockdown now as we're doing these videos. I have had no complaints from her at all about being locked in this house. She's completely fine being locked away and not going out, right? She's not doing anything, and she kind of knows she's allowed to sort of not have to do anything because it's sort of, she's being safe. This is working marvelously for her, right? Right.
Actually, isn't it much of a problem for me? You know, I'm now under a 16-hour curfew, and
Oh
I'm
God.
fine staying at home. And I think that does have something to do with my mood.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I would say that she can go into sort of very bad moods. I mean, it's probably like her age, And when I mean, touch wood, she hasn't for sort of quite a while now. But when I have known her go into such bad moods, it's like she goes into a cave and she will not let anybody enter that cave. She'll come out only when she's good and ready to come out, and it's kind of like, oh my God, where have you gone? And that is extreme sun in Cancer as far as I'm concerned, when that happens. And that's when she's got herself into a situation that she doesn't know how to deal with. She'll do one of two things. She'll either turn to me, and who am I? The mother. The moon represents the mother.
Yes.
But we'll talk about the moon later. Or she'll crawl into the cave.
Yes.
When the mood goes down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and whereas, as I say, my son, who is Capricorn, he's just kind of out there, kind of one project to another, kind of getting on with his life. They could not be more different. And as I say, I can make those comparisons because I've been with both of them since they were born, and they haven't suddenly become like this. They've kind of like evolved naturally. It's like you've seen this all coming every step of the way, really.
Yeah.
Being their mother.
I have that opposition within myself as well, because I have a rising sign, which is Capricorn, and then a moon sign, which is Cancer.
Yeah.
So there is a conflict.
Yes.
We can talk about it.
But I kind of like feel that as a Cancer person, like her, she is quite home loving in a sense, and I kind of like, it's really weird because I'm Aquarius, which is kind of very different to Cancer, but because I am her mother, my role is her mother. In a funny way, we clash in some ways as people, but the bond is really obvious at the same time.
Yeah.
I think as a Cancer, you will make it work somehow with your mother, unless it's really afflicted, in some way.
Right.
I'd like to think that is the case. That's how it feels from my perspective.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So a few more things I'd like to add about Sun and Cancer.
Yeah.
Because the Sun is an extroverted, expressive energy.
Yes.
More focused on manifesting things out there. The mood swings of someone with the Sun in Cancer are likely to be more apparent, more obvious to other people than the mood swings of someone with the Moon in Cancer, right? Because the Moon works in a more private way,
Oh, I see.
That's an important distinction to make.
So you would say it's more noticeable someone with the Sun in Cancer, the mood swings.
Yes.
I like that observation. Yeah.
And also so there is, okay, if we understand Cancer as a cardinal water sign, right?
Yes.
We need to understand that, it's not just purely receptive, like as Pisces might be, you might argue, right?
Yeah.
Or not purely, I don't want to, like, nothing is pure, but not predominantly receptive, right? So there is something about Cancer which is, to varying degrees of consciousness, using their emotional intelligence, which is very high.
Yes.
To manipulate people and surrounding circumstances to their advantage, right?
So like capable of emotional blackmail. Is that what you're saying?
Blackmail, or just more generally, I don't want to be that specific, but more like manipulation, So because they're good at kind of picking up on other people's energies, they're also good at kind of using their emotional ties with other people to turn around situations in a way that they think is to their advantage, in a way that they will make them feel more secure, or like that they're getting what they are hungry for, you know? I think that's a very Cancerian thing. And it'll probably be more obvious with in the case of a sun in Cancer, you know? It becomes more subtle and masterful with the moon in Cancer.
Oh, gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Scorpio.
yeah.
Do you want to talk about
Scorpio.
Scorpio?
Scorpio is very interesting. So Scorpio shares, since we're talking about the sun, shares something important in common with the Leo, the home of the sun. So it's a fixed energy.
Yes.
And it's also very, it's marked by willpower, which we see in the fact that, Mars, the planet of, the warrior planet, rules Scorpio traditionally, right? But the way that that kind of fixed energy, power craving, ambitious, resolute, determined, fixed energy manifests in Scorpio is quite different from Leo. Because it's so introverted and kind of it's taking place on an emotional internal plane. It also outwardly it expresses itself in more roundabout ways, So Scorpios will be kind of focused on getting people and circumstances to work in favor of their ambition, and in ways that serve their perception of themselves as powerful people, right? So it's a very different kind of it's a different kind of emotional engagement with the environment than what you see in Cancer. It shares with it that quality of manipulation, let's say, and indirectness, but it's in the service of an ambition, which is really an ambition that is socially engaged, right? Like I want to be a socially prominent person. I want to be a successful businessman. I want to be. I want to use my scorpionic perception.
Okay.
My keen scorpionic.
Right. So you see
insight
Scorpio as
into people to be a successful psychologist or whatever. So they'll use that powerful water intuition in a way that's about manifesting things in the outer world, manifesting success, right? And they're guarded, they're pretty guarded around, about their inner emotional world, because it is very important for them to remain in a position of advantage when they're dealing with other people. And because they're emotionally complex and deep, and that always comes with a big measure of vulnerability, right? They're very careful about protecting their inner world and their secrets, And I know several Scorpios, and it's really remarkable how much their ways of interaction compared to each other, They are so you always end up feeling that what is not being expressed and not being put into words is so much more than what is,
Right.
And sometimes gets frustrating for me, right? Because, I like to, I express myself pretty honestly a lot of the time, and it doesn't bother me to share,
Right.
personal details about my life. But with Scorpios, I, for the most part, I haven't found that to be the case.
Really?
They're very protective about their inner worlds, Um, yeah, so
I mean, I know somebody that's a Scorpio who I would have said had extreme loyalty,
yes,
and that makes sense to me with the
yes,
Scorpio energy. You know,
yes,
that depth of emotion and that holding on thing. I would
yes.
imagine they struggle to kind of move on and let things go, actually.
Yeah, they do. They're known for having, very long memories and not forgetting
Yeah.
um,
Um,
injuries, and slights.
I would imagine
Um,
they're extremely discreet. I
mhm.
think you could probably really trust them, not just with their own secrets, but with your secrets. My instinct would be, if I had to share something with someone, I thought, I can't keep this to myself. I've got to tell it to someone, but I know I've got to trust this person. I feel I could really probably trust a Scorpio,
Yeah,
generally
yeah,
speaking.
because they respect privacy and
Yeah,
secrecy.
yeah, I
I
think
agree. Yeah,
so.
and
Um,
I think you were exactly right when you said they're loyal and committed because for them, emotional relationships are a very serious matter. They're
yeah,
deep and they're complex, and they wouldn't be inclined to spend their emotional energy on people in a scattered, wasteful way.
yeah.
It's important for them to build substantial emotional connections.
I would imagine they're quite hard to get to know.
Yes.
I wouldn't imagine they rush into things, whether it's a relationship or whether it's like if you worked with one of them or something. I just feel, but I would imagine that over a period of time, the more you got to know them, the more you would. I think they'd be interesting people to kind of like the onion thing as you
Yeah,
discover more about them.
absolutely. I absolutely agree. Yes.
I don't think I've ever had a close friend who's been a Scorpio, to my knowledge.
Mm, 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 mm. Another, I have how do you say, relatives, I guess you could say, some
Yeah,
friends. Yeah. Um, I do have scorpionic aspects also in my chart. I have two planets in Scorpio, Mars and Jupiter. So I can't say that I'm totally kind of open, but I mean, I understand kind of where that pattern comes from. But it can be a challenge definitely to get past the Scorpio's defensive kind of boundaries, you know?
mm.
Um,
Can they be a bit morbid as well, or
well, the thing
maybe?
is, okay, so this brings us to the next point I wanted to
Yeah,
mention, which is that, they're famous for really um, wanting, really kind of being pulled towards probing everything in depth, you know,
yeah,
and that reinforces the more modern association between Scorpio and Pluto. Because Pluto is the planet of kind of like, the planet that seeks truth no matter what, no matter how dark or ugly it is, right? So that's a quality that you do see in Scorpios. I feel, they're very they would make perfect like psychoanalysts,
yeah.
and people who've discussed Scorpio before, that this aspect of Scorpio, the digging deep. They've
What
mentioned
about
that
detectives? I mean,
detectives
if
as
you were
well.
a
Yeah,
detective, do you think that is more of a Scorpio thing or a Virgo thing, or maybe a little bit of both?
it could be both. It could be both. Yeah. Um, I think if you're being a detective, out of this fascination with people's psychology, criminal psychology, for example, that's definitely a more Scorpio thing, you
Mm.
know. Um, they would be probably more fascinated with the morbid than other signs because
Yeah,
they have an emotional intensity, um, and they have a leaning towards kind of emotional depth, just the kind of understanding everything at a very deep emotional level, right?
Yes.
So that can make them, hmm, yeah, that can make them pretty, I say, lean towards or
Dark.
exist in the more on the more dark shade of the emotional spectrum. And I'm
Yes.
saying dark because, or maybe a better, maybe I'll just stick with the word intense. A lot of the intensity of human psychology comes just from the complexity of human relationships. And Scorpios are much more comfortable um, existing in those parts of the emotional spectrum, and exploring them, through their work, through their imagination, etc. Yeah. So that's what I have to say.
Interesting.
Scorpio. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very mysterious. Okay. And what about Pisces? Finishing up
Yeah.
on the water
Whew.
signs. Sun in Pisces.
Probably I would say Pisces, they might be the most difficult zodiac sign to pin down and understand, right?
Mutable
Remember,
water. Yeah.
mutable water. So you have kind of that uh, fluidity uh, amplified. This amplified fluidity first because they're water elements. Second, because they're mutable. It's
Yeah.
just so by nature they're so changeable, right?
Yes.
Um, and the sun is really not about that. It's not about being fluid and mutable, right? It's about being itself in a more clear way, right? Um, so that sets up an interesting dynamic, because on the one hand, you could see it as a kind of balancing factor. That solar energy, which is more focused and fixed, kind of balancing out watery, mutable energy that otherwise might kind of just get out of control, and just get scattered like in all directions, right? On the other hand, you could see it as a kind of a conflict of energies or conflict of characters, you know? So yeah, Pisces people in general are not simple to understand. But Pisces energy, when it's expressed in a solar kind of way in the world, how will you see that? Like you will see that as Pisces people really gravitating towards many different fields of study, fields of service, practice, like I have a sister in Pisces and she constantly amazes me with the breadth of um, uh, types of work or fields of service that she's actually managed to become really good at, not even like not experiment with in a kind of dilettante way that is more typical of Gemini energy, let's say, right? But actually deeply engaging, and I don't think this is a coincidence. For the most part, um, the subjects and vocations that have interested her have been either artistic or spiritual or both.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And it's like moving from, let's say, yogic meditative practices and rituals,
Yeah.
holistic health training, like that involves paying equal attention to physical routines and uh, psychological kind of how do you say oh God, I'm at a loss for the word here. Let's say explanations, right? Psychological doctrines, right? And spiritual doctrines, right? All wrapped up in one kind of practice. And I'm specifically thinking of the Paul Chek school here. and moving from all that to Sufi, the Sufi dervish kind of tradition is really amazing, you know, of her. And you know, I've selected her as
My dog is barking. I'm just going to mute my sound for a minute.
okay, yeah. So I've selected her as a kind of epitome of the Piscean archetype because I really feel like, you know, her life journey really reflects um, the the tendencies and the potential of Pisces, you know, the ways in which they can contribute to the world. Um, one challenge, a pretty difficult challenge that Pisces people, the Sun and Pisces people face is, well, choosing where to invest their energies in. Right? On the one hand, it's very good for expanding your inner horizons to invest in different types of subjects and activities, right? On the other hand, it's not practical. It's not very practical, right? In the end, like, you know, this is a planet that's more ruled, I feel like, or more kind of under the dominion of a Saturnine kind of energy. You know, it's like you have to work, you know, and you have to work to make money, and you make money because
it's all a bit. It is all a bit fantasy, isn't it? And imagination
right.
and all that sort of thing. Yeah, it's kind of that the imagination comes first before anything practical or realistic. Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying, especially because we earlier today did the earth signs that are all so real and earthy. Even though earth and water are both feminine signs, they are very different. They're very different, earth and water. And I think Pisces takes it to the extreme.
Yes.
Or can do, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So one challenge they face is in choosing where to focus their energy so that they don't end up just floating around in the world and, you know, not able to carry themselves.
Yes, right? Yeah. I definitely feel, though, on a spiritual level, if they were to kind of be interested in all things spiritual or, you know, spiritual activities, I feel that would be a very, I think Pisces people could be very psychic, very magical. I feel that they could be amazing if they were kind of just taking this energy into a spiritual realm. It's all that, if they felt the inclination to do that, I think if they don't, they run the danger of becoming quite emotionally lost. It's like all over the place.
Yes. It's an interesting kind of, it's a bit of a paradox, that kind of receptivity. All the water signs are receptive, I would say. Pisces is receptive in a way that's kind of by default oriented toward the collective and the transpersonal, you know? So part of their own, you know, motivating energy, right, is to kind of dive into the intersections between their own sense of self and the kind of collective psychology or collective energy, you know. So in one sense it's energizing for them, right? And in another sense it's potentially stressful and potentially, you know, dangerous, I would say, you know, because in the end, to be in the world, like, you do need to have boundaries around your ego, you know. So if you've got, let's say, besides the sun, I'm trying to think of an example just to kind of articulate what is risky in being in taking Piscean energy to the extreme. Like, say, in addition to the sun, you have Jupiter in Pisces, right? And Jupiter is this expansive planet which traditionally rules Pisces, right? So you might have a risk of just kind of like really losing your sense of self and to the point where you can get easily overwhelmed by other people's identities and energies and drained by them, right? And then you end up being frustrated, right? You feel like you don't have enough of an ego boundary, and that will lead to frustration, and that might even lead to kind of these explosive kind of reactions against people, which are not in the Piscean, typical Piscean kind of psychology, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, these are two interesting challenges. Like, where to focus their energy in terms of work, right? In terms of
I personally think that they're naturally kind of suited towards creative or kind of artistic, or you know, like being songwriters or poets, or, you know, expressing their emotions through some kind of art form or spiritual activity. To me would be like the obvious place for them to be, that's going to bring out the best in them.
Absolutely.
That's just my opinion. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think just to kind of leave them with the real world and get on with it could be very difficult. Could be very difficult for the Pisces. I don't know, but yeah.
No, I agree with that.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you, Khalid. That was very interesting. The sun in all the water signs. So yeah, which going back to what you said in the first place, I think that's true. Just the very nature of the sun being in water signs is immediately kind of a bit unnatural, but is it? Don't know. But yeah,
it's challenging. I want to say unnatural.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will be back with the moon in the earth signs and the moon in all the water signs. So yeah, that's to follow shortly. So yeah.
All right.
See you. Bye.
Bye.